My name is Deborah Miles. I'm with the Center for Diversity Education, and part of our work on the UNCA campus is putting up some of the CDE exhibits. And the one that is on display now through April is called In the Footsteps of Pilgrims, Historic Travels of Faith. And it looks at local eyewitness pilgrims who did some kind of a journey, mostly in the 1990s. Half of it is on the historic journey of the Hajj. So if you go into the area where the eating area is downstairs, you'll see the material on the Hajj in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. We have 3 other programs that will happen March 22nd. Will be on Jerusalem with Dr. Rick Chess and Jenna Gold. On March 29th will be Dr. Kia Maitra on Varanasi in India in the Hindu pilgrimage. And on April 5th will be Khalid Bashir on the Hajj to Mecca. So I hope you'll come back for those at 12:15. I'm very grateful to Asia and the Asian students in Asheville, and to Minori Hines, who co-sponsor this today. And Minori is going to introduce the Gentlings. So thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. I'm Minori Hines. I'm president of Asheville, or Asian Students in Asheville. Our purpose is to unify. Asia's purpose is to unify students that are interested in Asian cultures and Asian American issues by engaging the general campus through social interaction, cultural programs, and political awareness. We strive to negate racial and ethnic tension and promote greater understanding of the spectrum of Asian culture. We've been an officially recognized student organization since the 2000 fall semester. We welcome students of all heritages to join. We're currently trying to initiate an Asian Studies program or center, and we need as much help as possible. So if you'd like to offer us some help, please email us at asia.unca@gmail.com or just look up Minori Hines in the directory. Dr. Peter Gentling is a graduate of Carleton College whose unique alumni association offers out-of-the-ordinary trips for its graduates. In the early 1990s, Peter and his wife Jasmin went on a 14-day walking pilgrimage on the island of Shikoku, which is the smallest and least populous of the 4 main islands of Japan. And it's that island right there. Okay. The pilgrimage is called Hachiju Hakkasho, which means 88 places, known as the 88 Temple Pilgrimage. It was started by Kukai, posthumously known as Kobo Daishi, and he's the founder of Shingon Buddhism, which started about 2,000 years ago. He was also an accomplished linguist, painter, sculptor, calligrapher, and writer. Legend has it that he found enlightenment on this pilgrimage, walking an approximate 1,400 kilometers or about 900 miles, and that it can be achieved by those who follow in his footsteps. The pilgrimage starts in the Tokushima prefecture and continues to the Kochi and Ehime prefectures, ending with the Temple 88 in Kagawa. After one completes the pilgrimage, they head to Kyoya-san Temple in Wakayama prefecture to complete the pilgrimage. This tradition began with dedicated walkers who had plenty of time to examine their souls. The majority of the henro, which is Japanese for pilgrimage, or pilgrim, were those who desired to cure themselves or others of illness or to seek religious salvation, but some enjoyed the opportunity just for an adventure. Though there's been a recent resurgence in popularity of the pilgrimage, it is rare these days for a henro to choose to walk the long, arduous path. People now often travel by car or bus, as well as on bicycles. Pilgrims from all parts of the country meet on their journey and often become friends, and the Shikoku people are kind to pilgrims, and old-fashioned folks still offer alms to them in the belief that it will save their souls. Please welcome Dr. Gentling and his wife, Jasmin.
Thank you, Minori. We discovered a lot about Kobo Daishi on this pilgrimage, as well as finding out things about ourselves. We all end up with flat feet and fallen arches. We walked 220 miles, did 35 of the 88 temples, but really for us, for Jasmin and me, that probably was enough. Don't you imagine, Jazzy? Why don't you take this and I'll get the other one.
Okay. Peter's professor at Carleton College, who was the president, called us one day, Bardwell Smith, and asked us if we would be 2 of 7 that were going to take this pilgrimage. Bardwell had already done half the pilgrimage, and he wanted to finish it. And so he asked us to go. And I remember looking at Peter and going, I have to walk 220 miles? Oh, I don't know if I can do that. And Bardwell said, well, I'd like to remind you that the pilgrimage will begin when you hang up the phone today and say yes. And so, of course, being the way we are, we of course said yes. And the pilgrimage indeed did begin when we left the house, because I do not speak Japanese. I do not read Japanese. And we had to get to Temple 1 in Tokushima on the island of Shikoku. We had to get there by 3 o'clock on a certain day.
By ourselves.
By ourselves. And there was nobody meeting us at the plane or anything, and we had to do that. And I must tell you, I was scared to death. But the way we decided to do this today was to show you the slides at the end. We'll just go through the slides of our thing and just tell you very, very briefly of our experiences. Peter and I both had very different experiences on this trip. So I'll let Peter tell you about his experience, and then I'll tell you about mine.
Well, this was in 1996 when we went on this walk. And Bardwell had called and offered us this opportunity since we knew him from a trip to Japan to do gardens in 1987, several years before that. We'd had such a wonderful trip on this garden tour that we decided we could not miss the Kobo Daishi pilgrimage. For me, one of the most wonderful things was meeting Eishin Nishimura, who was a Zen priest from Kyoto who had brought 6 or 7 of his parishioners there, and none of them spoke English. One of them spoke English, who was had been a soldier in the Japanese army in World War II, and he was one of the very few people who had lived through the Iwo Jima episode. Almost all the Japanese soldiers were killed there. He had had his arm halfway shot off, and he was taken as a prisoner for interrogation. It's the only way he survived. And to talk with him and some of the other Japanese people along this trip was a very spiritual experience in many ways. But Eishin Nishimura, he spoke English very well. He's taught in the United States on several occasions and in several universities in the Northeast. We learned one thing after the other from him. First of all is that you can be a spiritual person and still have a darn good sense of humor. And he laughed a lot, he danced a lot, he told stories and jokes. He was not what you would call filled with religiosity in that sense. Don't you think, Jazz? Why don't we go ahead and start the slides, and we'll go through these. When we landed in Tokyo, we took a next flight on to Osaka, and then stayed the night in a hotel. This is a view of Osaka from the window of our hotel. You'll see across the street is the temple complex in the middle, but you also see fields of rice right in the city. We people don't understand where our food comes from, and I worry that our young people don't understand sometimes, because in big cities like Chicago or New York, you never see a field or anything of that nature. Japanese people seem to understand the need to use every particular space, and I perfectly enjoyed the urban and rural combinations.
I had a different take on Japan than Peter did. First of all, I think the word spirituality has been overused like self-esteem. Those two words, I have no idea what they mean anymore. Did I have a spiritual journey? Did I have this Zen? No, I did not. I took it more as an adventure than I did as a pilgrimage. Certain things happened, which I'll tell you about when we get to the slides of it, that happened in the course of it. But my impression of Japan was that a lot of the things of nature, the natural things, have all been manipulated. All the gardens are manipulated. All the trees are contorted with wires, and and bamboo things. And while I like it very, very much, it almost as if it's a dominance. I'm going to win over nature. It wasn't things just naturally there. It was beautiful, and we've done a lot of it in our garden here. But here I am. You're seeing me at the airport. I'm shaking in my shoes here because this is when our journey began. The sign's in kanji, and I'm trying to figure out how to get to the ferry to take me across the water to get to Shikoku, and from Shikoku to get to Temple 1 by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and thinking it's not going to happen.
There is a paradox in a sense. The cities are so modern and user-friendly, actually, and busy, filled with people, bustling. And then the temples and the gardens are very much oases of quietude in the middle of the city. That's what we saw. We started here in Osaka, which is up here, and took a ferry over to Tokushima, which is there.
That's what we had to figure out. What does the sign say? And where to go. And this is the ferry that we took across. It was a beautiful ferry, and the transportation is beautiful in Japan, very easy to go on. This is I wanted to tell you one quick story. We got to the end of the ferry, and we got in there, and I'm thinking, and the lady says, I don't speak English. She said she was able to say it in English. I don't speak English. And I'm trying to figure out how to get to the temple, and we're at the ferry, and I was trying to buy the tickets, and I'm thinking, what have we done? And this lovely lady was standing behind me, and she tapped me on the shoulder like this, and she said, in French, do you speak French? And I said, at that point, we hadn't taken any French. I said, no. And she says, sprechen Sie Deutsch? And I said, ein bisschen. And she said, oh, good. So from that moment on, we spoke with these two Japanese that had just been in Germany studying music, had come back to Shikoku, and I was speaking German to them, and they
ran into a string quartet.
and so here we are in Japan speaking German to help us get to Temple 1, and it worked.
They took us to lunch, and then this nice woman stuck us in a cab, and she says to the man, what will it cost to get to Temple 1? He told her, we paid him, and we arrived right on the dot.
Exactly. Here we are. This is Temple 1, and this is us before. We are just gaijin. We are just non-Japanese, and we're at Temple number 1, and we are not dressed as Henro yet.
But Temple 1's where you buy your equipment.
And here we are, now we're Henro. These are the costumes we wore, uniforms, I don't know. And what I didn't, this is the hat we wore with a rain thing on it, because it rained a little bit, but we wore them every day, and we carried a pack on our back for about 15 minutes when I figured out that you don't have to be pure about this. You can put your pack in a cab and have the cab take it 20 miles down the road, and then you can have a wonderful time walking. Now, the other purists in the group thought I was terrible doing that, and I said, well, my conscience doesn't bother me, so you guys carry your packs if you want to. And it wasn't 3 days before all the packs were in the thing. Actually, it started because one of the people sprained his ankle and could not carry his pack. So the cab arrived to take his pack because he had sprained his ankle, and I thought, silly to have the pack go alone. So
the longest walk we did was 22 miles the first day, and we were not in real shape to do this. But we would go from one temple to the next, and at that temple, then you would say the Heart Sutra. You would say it twice. Once in one part of the temple, and then walk over to another part and say it again. I had never seen the Heart Sutra, but Bardwell had these things printed out. We said them right along with the rest of the pilgrims who were gathered there.
I might tell you we were the only pilgrims walking. We met one other after about 14 days.
We ran into a religious ascetic.
Right. But the rest of them it was very interesting. I had a real hard time with this spirituality issue because the Japanese get on Greyhound buses, and they get off Greyhound buses, and the Greyhound bus driver grabs their Nokias, which are these books that I have floating around here somewhere. I have one here somewhere. We have to have it stamped at each temple that says that you were there, and it's done by the priest at the temple. And the bus driver rushes in with all these Nokia books and gets them all signed, and the Japanese people are, doing the Heart Sutra and putting their prayers in the fire, and then they race back into the Greyhound bus, and off they go to the next one. And at first that took me a little while to get adjusted to it, but I was putting my frame of reference and my value system on them, which was really not right. And it was just as spiritual for them as it was for perhaps me. I'm sure it was more spiritual for them than it was for me, and I was making a value judgment. I learned a lot about myself on that first day.
Bardwell Smith was a religion professor at Carleton College. He was a Buddhist monk and an Episcopal priest. His special interest was Jiso, who is the spirit for unborn babies and women who die in childbirth. And babies who die and women who die in childbirth. And here's some of the little features that because Jiso was a prominent deity here. Here's us just walking along the road. It was striking to me how much this area looked like Western North Carolina. You could anywhere you looked, it was very much like this. As a matter of fact, even to the plant materials that we saw. In this particular place, some of the deities were to receive offerings of food, and then these would be later distributed to the less fortunate individuals. There was lots of this going on.
Miro, excuse me, honey. Miro, you mentioned in your introduction that people oftentimes participated in helping the pilgrims on their pilgrimage. Such a thing happened to me. I was walking along, and a very elderly Japanese woman came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and handed me this bag, must weigh 10 pounds of money, and I thought it was $1 bazillion, but it was really just pennies. And she asked me, she was too old to finish the pilgrimage, so she asked me if I would do the pilgrimage for her. And so she had already made them out, these little paper things that you make out, that you burn
little
at
prayers,
each temple,
yeah.
little prayers with her name on them. And she handed them to me with the money, and I indeed did finish the pilgrimage for her, but it took on a whole different meaning for me after I did that.
In this area, this is a Shinto shrine, a torii gate for the Shinto shrine. I was curious what the difference was between Shinto and Zen Buddhism. And Eishin Nishimura tried to get across to me what the difference really was and how they worked together. That's a long story. I don't really know if we really have much time for that. So, we went there. You have to be Japanese to be Shinto. You can't really be adopted into it. You can become a Jew or a Christian, but you can't really become Shinto. And if you're Japanese and you're a Christian, you're still Shinto. But they're wonderful, airy places filled with wonderful old trees. They honor the trees. First thing that you do when you come there is you purify yourself, wash your hands and your mouth, and then prepare yourself, say your prayers. Here's a camphor tree, which is 1,100 years old. I mean, we don't see stuff like that here. It's just along the way, the path was marked by these little henro signs, and so you knew where to go. But on other times, we would come to areas where the path was obliterated, and Eishin Nishimura had to ask the local people, who said, well, you can't get there from here, essentially. And once we had to wander through the jungle, and Eishin-san was picking his way, saying he was afraid of the mamushi, which is a poisonous snake that's there. We had to watch out for that. This is Cryptomeria, that particular tree.
You notice there's a rope around it with tassels, and that's a Shinto totem. They put them around the trees to hold the spirit in, or to extend the spirit from one rock to the other, but it's a very Shinto thing. I think that what I learned about myself on this is I'm probably, if I could be, I would be a Shinto, because it's really grounded in nature. You don't go into a place to worship. You are in a place and you worship what's around you, and it's the trees and it's the land, and
As opposed maybe to more classical Buddhism, which is
this is a Buddhist temple. We got up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Correction, they got us up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we had to go to a Buddhist service or a Shinto service, and then we would have breakfast, and then we were on the road. This is where we slept. This is the tatami mats, and all the girls were in one section, and all the boys were in the other. And here we are, all the girls. And some we knew, and some we didn't know, but we all slept together on futons.
On futon. Very comfortable, extremely clean. The ofuro, the bath, was wonderful, and we learned how to cleanse ourselves and use the bath.
And that was interesting. Another thing interesting about Japan that I found, they're not ashamed of their bodies in any way. They're not ashamed of the female body or the male body, and it wasn't until MacArthur went to Japan that the baths, the ufuros, were for male and female, and you just went in together, but it was nothing embarrassing about it. Everybody, and now they have the girls and they have the boys, but that was an American insistence in Japan.
We would occasionally eat in our rooms or in a dining room.
That's breakfast. Seaweed, rice, miso soup, raw fish.
Some fruit, usually a banana.
This is my favorite.
This is noodles for lunch.
Every day. We'd go to a noodle shop, and it cost like 25 cents, and they had a cauldron that was just huge and filled with broth, like a chicken broth or a beef broth. And if you say, I want a bowl of it, they just drop the noodles in, and then they scoop them back out again. And they're really long noodles. And it was wonderful.
And most of the noodle shops had a little freezer where you could get an ice cream bar for lunch. That's why Jazz didn't lose any weight on
I was
it.
hoping to lose weight on this trip. There's the snacks.
There's
They had
snacks.
octopi on a stick. Now, I must tell you,
Tofu.
I did not try that. But little children did. They were walking around like a lollipop or like an ice cream cone, just biting on the octopus. I tried just about everything, but I drew the line there. And that was that breakfast, honey?
Yeah.
Because we always had bananas for breakfast. We had the same meal every night, the same meal every breakfast, and the same meal every lunch. But this is our book. We brought our book. This is the man who signs the book at each temple to prove that you were there. You're on the pilgrimage.
You'd ring the bell when you got there to let the spirits know that you were there. Some people would light the little joss sticks in saying prayers, or would tie a little prayer onto a hook. There's some militant spirits who protect the place too, so which is good.
This is the one point in the trip that I really kind of fell apart. Peter and I, our first child, died when she was 4 months old, and I had come to this temple, and I started crying. I was really having a hard time, and Bardwell turned to me and he said, "What is wrong?" I said, "I have no idea. I mean, this is halfway through the pilgrimage, and here I am falling apart." And I had no idea. And he said, "Do you know where you are?" I said, "Well, no, I'm just on temple number, whatever number it was. I don't remember, do you?" And there were all these little dolls, and they had these bibs on them, and there were little things written on the bibs, but there were hundreds of them. You just see 4 there, but there are hundreds of them. It turns out that that was a temple that was dedicated to young children who had died, or children who had died in childbirth, or children who had died before they were born and miscarried, and those kind of things. There they are there. There's little, that's Kobo Daishi.
Statues of Kobo Daishi.
Yeah. And that was a very emotional time for me. I spent a lot of time, not at this temple, but at the one previously.
With prayer beads there. As we walked along, the countryside was just magnificent. We got to know the Japanese people very well, and we would sing songs as we'd walk along. Eishin-san on the right there is giving the lesson. The gaijin are on this side of the room, and the Japanese people on the other. That didn't last very long. We all intermixed very quickly.
You're not allowed to wear your clothes in the temple. The temple is a place it's meticulously clean. And you leave your shoes at the door, outside, and we never had one shoe stolen. And then you go in, and they give you those bathrobes, the yukata that we had on. We all wore the same one, and your clothes are put away so you don't have the dirt from outside inside.
One of the women is teaching jazz, Tai Chi here.
Oh, I love these women. Oh, this is my favorite. She had a little thing around her neck that was a computer.
She did not speak one word of English, but she had the most wonderful spirit and a gorgeous voice.
The last day we were
loved to sing.
Yeah, the last day we were together with this group, Peter and I was very tearful for both of us because we were coming down from a hillside, and these women broke into song, and it was a most beautiful song, and they taught it to us as we were coming down to the end of the trip. This is on my birthday. The Japanese couldn't believe we were doing this, and so they followed us all day long with television cameras because they were sure we were just pretending, and we got into cabs and went to the next place, and so they followed us all day long on the trip, and it was really quite fun.
Nippon TV. We ran into festivals in little towns, and they were absolutely fascinating. One after the other, little towns have these little festivals. We ran into the grandmothers of the moss in some of the temple gardens. They're older people who are retired, who volunteer and clean the moss gardens. See little kids going to school along the way. Going through Shikoku, which is one of the is the smallest of the four major islands, as Midori told you, is like this. We would stop in little shops where they were making rice buckets. Here's some of the other henro. But we would come into these religious festivals. These are the little kids that are practicing here, but the adults, this is really something. They invited us to join in. I got right in the middle. The smell of beer was very strong. Most of them were a little bit
The women follow behind this with a little wagon filled with alcohol, and the testosterone and alcohol combination in this festival was not to be believed.
It was wonderful. If you think about Mardi Gras, this is kind of like that, in a sense. All the way along, you saw attention to detail. We don't do that here. We don't honor our spaces quite like the Japanese seem to. They have a way of doing things which has a distinct dignity to it that we just don't seem to have. Every item is addressed and some thoughtful process has gone on in the design. These are things that I miss for our own country. Even in the ponds, all the stones are arranged, the little islands are created.
This is where we're breaking into song. This is the last day we were all together with the Japanese, and that was a very important day for all of us. That was a sad day, saying goodbye. This is a cemetery. We're just walking. You have to follow the Henro Trail, and some of the Henro Trail was on I-240, I-40. Some of it was in the middle of a bamboo forest. We walked everywhere.
Beautifully tended. There are little stores along the way where you can buy ice cream. But look at the character of this little rice farm down here, how absolutely beautiful and dignified this place is. There are ricks that hold the rice to let it dry. Welcome to Fort Apache. We saw this along the way too. So there's some westernization that's occurred. I won't go into the story of this, but this figure of the badger, do you know this, Minori? Do you know?
This represents prosperity.
The god of pleasure, you might call him. He's obviously well endowed there from a standpoint of procreation, and some of them have a little jug of wine with them. They drink too much. They have lots of sex. They have a lot to eat. You can see his little tummy is kind of poochy. He's a wonderful little symbol.
And there are shrines all along the roads when you go along. This is one of the Henro Path. We're right in the middle of Takamatsu. you go right downtown. That's an outdoor bathroom. And people go to the bathroom publicly. I mean, the bathrooms are
This was
one room.
maintained for the use of the Henro.
Henro, and it's one room if you're going into a building that's a bathroom, and the girls squat on one side and the boys stand on the other, and I guess they don't look. I don't know, but nobody seemed to mind it, and I didn't after a while either. Look at this lady. Isn't that cool? They decorate them with these aprons. And there's our pilgrimage.
Here's the path that we took through Tokushima Prefecture up through Kagawa Prefecture. Then we end up our pilgrimage there and took the train back. It took us an hour and 45 minutes on the train ride to cover what we'd walked on.
That's the last picture, and that's Peter and I, the last day of the pilgrimage. And it was an interesting time. My impressions of the trip are different now than they were at the time. I loved traveling with the Japanese. I loved every second of that. They are the most genuinely lovely people. Peter told you the story of Shimizu. He needs to tell you the story of his wife sometime. That was an interesting story, but we got to know them very well. And you imagine, in my generation, we were enemies, and here we were doing a pilgrimage together. That was really kind of special.
Have I got just a moment to tell a story? Okay. Shimizu-san's wife, Mrs. Shimizu-san, said, "I must tell you a story. When I was a little child, it was during the war. Every day, the airplanes, the cars would come by, and they would say the great Japanese army is victorious, and we're winning the battle. One day, a man comes up to them and hands them a box with some pills, and he said, 'It may be that one day the Americans will come. They eat people alive. They will take your skin off, and they will eat you. They will rape you first, and then they will eat you. So you need to dig a hole out back behind your house for a grave. And you take these pills, and they will kill you, and you fall into the grave because you don't want to fall into their hands.' He left them. 2 or 3 days later, this big silver plane flies overhead, and all these little pieces of paper fall out. They get them, and it says, 'You have lost the war. The war is over.' They didn't know whether to take the pills or not. They decided against it. One day, about 3 weeks later, the steam train comes up the hill, and this little soldier who didn't speak much Japanese gets off, and he has in a uniform, and he says, 'Is there some place here where I might be able to buy some noodles for lunch?' And Shimizu-san says, her mother says, 'Well, Mrs. Nakamura down the road has a noodle shop. You can eat there.' He said, 'Thank you very much.' He walked away, had his lunch, got back on the train and left, and that was the sole American occupation of their village. Just to show you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this to you.
So if folks have a question, if you'll hold on a second, raise your hand. I'm going to take this to you since we want to make sure everybody can hear it on the tape. So are there any questions? We've got about 10 minutes for questions.
If you were not physically prepared for the walk, you must have had times when the sense of fatigue arose in you. And how did you address that in a way that transformed the fatigue?
We were generally through with our walk fairly early in the afternoon. The first day was not true. We walked all day long that day. But we would get to the temple, we would relax, we'd take off our street clothes, and we'd go to the bath. and just relax. Then we'd have an evening service, generally speaking, turn in early after lessons. Eishin-san would tell us lessons and some stories.
I don't remember getting tired. I don't know how I can tell you that, but we started at 7 in the morning, and we walked at a very slow pace, and we were through probably, as Peter said, by 2 or 3 in the afternoon. We'd walked our 20 miles, and it wasn't a death march. It was just a nice, pleasant walk, and then we'd look forward to the baths. I don't remember being tired. Do you? I don't remember being tired.
Some of the days were only 8 or 10 miles long, and they didn't all go 20. The first day, we really did that to ourselves. We walked a number of miles to go to a Shinto shrine, temple, which was not on the pilgrimage. And we wanted to see that because Bardwell told us it was a special place.
One of the things about spiritualism I meant to tell you is that I told you that the word is very overused for me. I think that when people hear of that we went on a pilgrimage, that we came back different, that we saw the light or something, that was not my experience. It wasn't a Zen experience for me. It was an adventure, and it was wonderful, and I'm glad I went. I think that you can get that kind of a spirituality or that depth, you can get it in your own house. I don't think or in your own garden. I don't think you have to go somewhere to make that happen. You can just go sit under a tree. And a lot of the times that I felt the closest to in my faith was when I was just by myself under a tree somewhere that had really no relevance to the pilgrimage itself. I know that's blasphemy to say that, but I guess I'm just such a Shinto that I just love being outside.
I noticed you were walking on the sidewalk with cars on each side. Were there sidewalks along the way when you were by the road?
You could be walking in downtown Chicago. It was not that different.
Big trucks coming at us?
It was like walking on I-40. Yeah, like Jazz said.
Like walking on the side of I-40 sometimes.
The weather wasn't always good. Sometimes there was a downpour of rain, but we had rain gear, and you were quite comfortable. When you got to the temple, you took off all your outer clothes, and they gave you this fresh, new starched yukata. And you put that on and breathe a sigh of relief, and then go down and wash yourself very thoroughly with lots of soap and water, every part, every orifice, and then rinse yourself and get into the ofuro, the bath.
First day we were in the baths with the Japanese women, and I told Peter when I came out, I said, I think they were looking at me to see if I look different than they do. And I think that after that first day, I think that none of us were very embarrassed after that, because we realized that, oh, really, but some of the people in our group were a little embarrassed at first, but then we all kind of realized that we pretty much looked the same.
Parts is parts, as they say. Thank you for coming, everyone. We've enjoyed it.